When my father looked across his lavish holiday table and casually asked how I liked the home he bought for me, my entire life shattered into pieces. I did not live in a home, and I was barely surviving on my tiny paycheck in a cramped city apartment. If you love deep family drama stories, please subscribe to the channel now. Which country are you watching from today? Drop your country in the comments below. My name is Maya, and at 28 years old, I worked endless hours as a draftsperson just to pay for rent and instant noodles. Growing up as the forgotten daughter of a massive real estate tycoon named Preston, I learned early on that I was an outsider in my own bloodline. Every single year, I walked back into his glowing estate on Christmas night, hoping this time I would finally feel like I belonged. His home looked like something out of a luxury magazine, dripping with crystal chandeliers and draped in heavy pine garlands that smelled like rich money. But to me, those white marble halls were cold, empty, and terrifying. The household staff gave me pitying looks as I walked in, knowing my father preferred his polished stepfamily over his quiet, struggling birth daughter. My stepmother, Nora, glided into the foyer wearing a crimson dress, giving me her typical artificial smile that barely disguised her hidden disgust. Behind her was her adult son, Trevor, who immediately smirked and teased me about my rusty old car sitting in the grand driveway. I forced a quiet breath, promising myself I would not let their cruel little jabs get under my skin tonight. When my father finally entered the grand dining room, his commanding presence instantly silenced the room, making everyone stand up just a bit straighter. He bypassed his stepson and wife, looking directly into my eyes with an expression that almost looked like genuine pride. I swallowed the lump in my throat, desperately clinging to the foolish hope that maybe he wanted to reconnect. The long polished table was set with gold cutlery, bright crystal and fine china, creating a grand backdrop for 4 distant people. Dinner began with superficial conversation about corporate investments and charitable events, while I quietly ate my food to avoid drawing any unnecessary attention. But as the main course arrived, my father cleared his throat and asked a question that tore their secret wide open. He asked me how I was enjoying the suburban townhome he had purchased for me 2 years ago. Expecting a warm thank you, my fork froze halfway to my mouth, and every single person around the table suddenly stopped breathing as my pulse began to hammer violently. I swallowed hard and quietly told him that I lived in a tiny rental unit and owned no townhome. The atmosphere in the room turned instantly electric, dropping in temperature as my father slowly set down his wine glass with icy calmness. He explained that he transferred $500,000 to Nora so she could purchase a place directly in my name. The moment those words left his mouth, Nora dropped her fork, and Trevor turned completely pale, staring at the floor. My father turned his piercing gaze toward his wife, demanding to know why his daughter was living in poverty while the money was gone. Trevor tried to jump in and claim I was just confused, but my father snapped at him to keep his mouth shut. Nora sat trembling in her chair, unable to offer a real explanation as the ugly truth began to unravel. Nora stammered that they believed I was too young to handle real estate, so they took the money and repurposed it elsewhere. My face flushed with extreme heat as anger and deep hurt fought inside me, knowing how much I had suffered financially. Trevor muttered that everyone struggles at my age, but my father leaned forward and cut him off with terrifying silence. My father demanded to know where the missing funds were hidden, his voice dropping into a register that made the heavy table shake. Trevor looked cornered, his usual arrogant mask slipping away to reveal the coward sitting behind all that expensive clothing. Nora finally broke, sobbing that they took my house fund and invested it directly into Trevor starting his new company. I stood up from my chair, my hands shaking violently as I confronted them for taking the one thing meant to protect my future. Nora tried to defend herself by saying Trevor needed a head start, while Trevor arrogantly claimed he intended to pay it back eventually. My father stared at them in utter horror, realizing his own family had committed outright theft against his daughter. My father stood up, his tall frame looming over the table as he ordered both of them into his private study immediately. He turned to me with soft eyes, offering a sincere apology for letting me struggle alone, and asked me to follow them inside. Walking into that dark oak office felt like walking into a courtroom where the truth was finally going to be spoken. Inside the study, my father pulled out financial records from his desk, revealing that he had already quietly audited Trevor's starting business accounts. The documents proved that my stolen house money was used for luxury vacations, expensive clothes, and high-end country club memberships. Trevor tried to argue that life was tough, but my father slammed the files down and silenced him completely. My father declared that Trevor would undergo a full legal audit, surrender his business assets, and pay back every single cent stolen. Nora wept loudly on the couch, begging for mercy, but my father turned to me and said I had the power to press charges. Looking at Trevor sitting terrified in his chair, I realized that I held all the power in the room. I looked my stepbrother in the eyes and told him I would not put him in prison today, but he would sign the papers. He agreed immediately, signing over the legal repayment agreements drafted by my father's personal attorneys without saying another word. For the very first time in my life, I felt the heavy weight of being second best lift off my chest. My father handed me the deed to a beautiful downtown apartment near my office, ensuring my days of struggling in silence were finally over. I walked out of that mansion with my head held high, knowing that the truth had finally set me free from their shadow. Thank you for listening, and if you want to watch more incredible stories like this one, click the video on your end screen right now.